Welcome to Perspectives from the Top. Today it is my great privilege to be interviewing Lord Karan Bilimoria, the founder and chairman of Cobra Beer. Karan comes from a respected Indian family with roots in business and the military. His father was a general in the Indian Army and his grandfather was the first Indian officer to go through Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. Karan studied law at Cambridge and whilst doing so played polo. And whilst playing polo, he noticed that British polo sticks were nowhere near as good as Indian polo sticks. So he started importing Indian polo sticks to the degree that they were eventually stocked by Harrods. In 1989, with his co-founder Aaron Reddy, they came up with the idea of Cobra Beer, a perfect beer that is tasty, light, smooth, but not gassy. The perfect complement for any meal, particularly an Indian meal. They worked with a brewery in India to produce that perfect recipe and imported the beers into UK. And Karan personally delivered the first batches in his 2CV to Indian restaurants around London. The business expanded and production was moved to the United Kingdom. In 2006, Karan was elevated to the upper house of the UK Parliament as Baron Bilimoria of Chelsea. And in 2009, the strategic venture with Molson Coors was put into place and the business now continues to grow. But not only is Karan the chairman and founder of Cobra Beer, he's also chairman of his own charitable foundation, Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, and as a member of the upper house of the British Parliament, a frequent speaker on matters of legislative and other importance to the United Kingdom. So it's a great pleasure to have such an experienced entrepreneur and somebody who contributes to such a significant degree to the well-being of the country. So welcome, Karan.
Thank you.
Your journey with Cobra is really interesting. You know, you started in that flat in Fulham as a student, and what you did was you weren't looking at something that no one had ever done before, as some entrepreneurs do. You were looking at taking on the global brewing industry head on in a flat in Fulham. What made you think you had any chance of succeeding?
It was against all the odds. Big brewers are well established.
Absolutely.
They have deep pockets. And when I say well established, many of them are centuries old. And our biggest beer brand in India, Kingfisher, had been in the UK for 8 years before we started. And we had no money. I had £20,000 of student debt still to pay off. So it is against the odds, and it does eventually come down to the belief that you have a product that is different and better, ideally will change the marketplace forever, and will deliver a genuine benefit to the ultimate consumer, as well as to everyone who's selling that beer. That was the belief in Cobra, of creating a product that was genuinely different and better.
And one of the things that you say is interesting about that belief, I think if you look at the number of entrepreneurs who are successful versus those that aren't, you know, there are a portion of them who have an idea that they have total belief in, but actually it's not a good one. And how do you do the analysis that says, actually, this is a viable idea?
And this is where entrepreneurs have the guts to do it when others may not.
Right.
Entrepreneurs also have the guts to stick with it when others would give up. So the resilience is very important. That also means an attitude of never give up, never ever give up.
Yeah.
But what's the point of never giving up when you're banging your head against a brick wall and you've got an idea that's actually not going to succeed? And so there is a contradiction here in that you also need to know when to give up if you're pursuing an idea that genuinely is not going to take off. And in our early days, before we started Cobra, when we were importing other products like the polo sticks from India, there were many other products that we imported that we could not even make one sale because for a number of reasons, and individual reasons, they were never going to fly. And you then got to give up because you'd be wasting your time and wasting money, which you could apply to another idea. And with an idea that's working, you know straight away, because you can sell it, and most importantly, you get the reorders. And with Cobra Beer, from day one, we got a 99% reorder rate. Once you get those reorders, you know that people like your product, and then it's extrapolating that into a global beer brand.
So do you think part of your success was actually, therefore, going into a niche market rather than trying to confront the big brewers head on in the main market?
Absolutely. I call it, and I've termed it as breakthrough strategy.
Yeah.
In that I didn't have the money to advertise. I didn't have the money for even branded beer glasses. So how would I break through with what little I had, which was a great product?
Yeah.
How could I get that product in front of consumers and get that ball rolling so that one day I would be able to get it on the supermarket shelves, I'd be able to export it, I'd be able to get it into the pubs? And I said, I'm going to start with the Indian restaurants, with the curry restaurants, where beer is the favorite drink with spicy food. And if I can get my bottles on the Indian restaurant tables, people will discover my product. And I will have to build it from the grassroots with a following that is almost a cult following, where people discover the product. And then when it's available on the supermarket shelf, they say, that's the beer I love with my food and with my Indian food. I'll buy it to take home to drink. And that's exactly what we've done. And if I'd gone immediately, even with the best salesmanship in the world, and persuaded Tesco supermarkets to stock Cobra on its shelves on day one, it would have sat there gathering dust. Because no one would have known the brand, we had no advertising budget, and we would not have been able to sell anything. So we've actually worked out the right way, that by the time we got the beer onto the supermarket shelves, we then had the scale to be able to market, to be able to advertise, and have an integrated marketing plan, but with the breakthrough strategy in the beginning.
At one point, didn't you actually offer the beer free to Indian restaurants to see if people liked it?
What we would do is, if we walked into a restaurant and our product was more expensive than the competitors, I always made sure it was more expensive because it was a better product, and you get what you pay for.
Sure.
And it was also an unknown product, and in double-sized big bottles, in the way that 90% of beer is sold in India. And so the restaurateurs were having to take on something that they didn't, an unknown product that was more expensive in a size that they were not used to. And the way we would say is, please just try a couple of bottles with your regular customers. And the restaurants, a lot of the restaurant owners themselves didn't drink for religious reasons. And they would say, look, don't worry, it's not about us, it's about our customers. Leave a couple of bottles, we'll try it with our regular customers. If they like it, we'll put in our first order. And sure enough, the customers loved it when they tasted it. And we get our first order, and then we get the reorders.
Amazing strategy. So having got that initial traction in the market, then you were in a period of rapid growth. How did you survive that? Because that rapid growth period is so often the point at which small businesses fail because they can't meet the demand that they've created.
The meeting of the demand is very much always looking ahead. And you should be setting targets on a regular basis. So even before the first container was shipped from the brewery in Bangalore in India to the UK, I had prepared a 5-year spreadsheet month by month of how much beer I was planning to sell. And I never sold a bottle of beer in my life. Now, we ended up beating those targets, but you have to set those targets, continually review those targets. And of course now, for us, it's weekly targets, monitoring sales on a day-to-day basis. But even now, at the scale that we're at, you're constantly setting yourselves targets that you're measuring against and trying to achieve. And when you're looking ahead, you're planning so that and you're trying to cater for your growth, and you make sure you've got the supply. You don't always get it right. And especially in the early days when we're importing from India, with the time lag of the shipping time from India, you would have situations when you would run out of beer. And that was not good. So it's not good because your customers are unhappy, but also you're losing sales you'll never get back. So you try to avoid that at all costs. You do your best, but it's by having this attitude of looking ahead the whole time.
I think, and also I think one of the challenges is the market that you are in inherently is highly variable from a day-to-day and week-to-week basis in terms of your demand vis-a-vis, for example, the weather. So if the weather suddenly gets hot, or people are going out to Indian restaurants more, you have a completely different, a sudden increase in demand or a sudden decrease in demand.
And you have to be adaptable. I always say any good business will be a business that looks ahead, that plans, but the key is it a flexible, adaptable business that can adapt to change? A lot of it sometimes outside the business's control. And in the ultimate example of that is, can you deal with a crisis as a business? And most crises come completely out of the blue. Who predicted 9/11? It just happened.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with a crisis in a business? That is the key. And I found, looking back on it, when the 3 times I've nearly lost my business, there were, each of the 3 times were things that just happened that I could not necessarily have predicted. And yet the 3 things that got me through the crises, one was having a strong brand. Secondly was having a terrific, loyal team and my own family supporting me, including my wife. The third was always sticking to the right values and always operating with integrity, even when you're right down in the dumps with everything against you. You stick to your principles, and you literally follow the mantra of it's better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing.
I think that last sentence is one that the corporate world should take to heart, because in 2009, when you had those challenges there and you went into the strategic venture, that must have been quite difficult for you. We won't go into sort of the details about some of the corporate news that is repeatedly coming out about leaders in the corporate world who seem to think that it is more important to make money than stick to your values. And your experience then told you, actually, it's more important to stick to your values, because then if you stick to your values, the team sees you sticking to your values, and then they stick with you. Is that a good summary?
Very much so, and particularly in the situation of a joint venture, where I have joint venture partners, where we work together, and the reason it works primarily, and in any joint venture you will have disagreements, you will have friction, things are not always going to go smoothly, but it'll work or not work based on one thing alone, and that is trust. If you have that trust that is based on a mutual respect of values, that you know your partner will never try and take a shortcut or hide something from you, and will always be open with you and will work with you, that trust means you can have a long-term sustainable joint venture. And it's so important, and I've seen this in our joint venture with Molson Coors is 10 years old, and we've just renewed it because it's based on that bedrock of mutual trust.
You talk about that strategic partnership, and I think it's interesting. One of the challenges, I think, with strategic partnerships is that too often the other partner isn't as inspired as what you do about what you do, and they have their own brands, they have their own business. How do you find? Obviously, you have the right strategic partner there because you've renewed. But how do you get over that challenge of getting them to be inspired about what you do as you are?
And this is where the reason for the joint venture, if you go back to it, why? One is the founder, entrepreneur, i.e. I'm there in the business,
still
day
involved,
to day, chairing the joint venture. My team is there with me, and we've got a very strong brand that is delivering great sales and great profits. Now, if you are valuable as a brand, as a team, as an individual, then of course it's going to work very well. And the synergies of being part of a large multi-billion-dollar global brewer is we have the synergies of manufacturing and distribution and all the other the people around the world that work in the organization.
Given where you are now, so therefore, where do you see Cobra going in the future? Because you've got virtually every single Indian restaurant in the United Kingdom.
We have 98.5% distribution in the Indian restaurant, the curry restaurant sector. However, we could still grow within that sector because in terms of market share, we could always sell more Cobra and our other products into the sector.
Because you're now developing your product lines as well.
We've got, for example, Malabar Blonde India Pale Ale, the IPA, which has just recently been launched and has gained tremendous traction, is actually growing exponentially at the moment on a daily basis. So there's potential for all our Indian restaurant customers to sell Malabar. We have expansion into other areas. So for example, we've now increasingly being sold in Thai, Chinese, Turkish, Lebanese restaurants, and increasingly in gastropubs and casual dining outlets, let alone the mainstream pubs. And our growth in the supermarkets, we've got a good presence in the supermarkets in the UK, but we've got a lot of growth potential there. And then there's the scope for constant innovation. So the Malabar Blonde IPA is one example. We brought out a gluten-free Cobra. We're bringing out another new product to be launched in the summer of 2019 from Belgium. And it carries on. The innovation is non-stop. So then there are the export markets. We're exported to 40 countries around the world, including almost all the countries in Europe and as far afield as Canada and Japan and Australia. And we've got huge potential where exports are concerned. So I think we're still a fraction of the size that we should be as a brand.
If you look at that potential market, you have exploited a fraction of it. But what is interesting from my perspective is that it goes back to that core concept in 1989 of a beer that is smooth, isn't gassy, and is the perfect complement to a meal, rather than a beer you just drink when you're not having a meal, which is what most traditional beers are. And that core concept has given you something that is truly unique.
To this day, our slogan is brewed smooth for all food.
And from personal experience, I can assure you it's true. But so therefore, given everything you've achieved, what would be a couple of pieces of advice that you would give to an entrepreneur or a small business out there to inspire them to go to greater heights and achieve what they want to achieve?
First and foremost, you've got to have a great big idea with an absolute belief in that idea. You then have to be able to get that idea off the ground with guts. The guts of never giving up. And then you have to start building a team. You can't do it on your own. And we started with my business partner, Arjun and Reddy and I. There were just two of us. But soon we started to build a team. And that's how you're able to then expand your brand and take it to actually take off. And then it's working in partnership with your customers, your suppliers, with people who finance you, and having a model of partnership in everything that you do, not sort of bullying your suppliers and worshipping your customers, but actually treating everyone as partners. And always looking ahead, always taking a long-term view. There's never going to be an overnight success. And planning ahead, looking ahead, setting yourself those targets, having a very clear mission, and in our case, to brew the finest ever Indian beer and make it a global beer brand. You can measure that every day. Having a vision, having an attitude, in our case, to aspire and achieve against all odds with integrity. So having that always ability to, wanting to go the extra mile, and the right attitude is what drives it all forward, and with integrity, with the right principles and the right values.
It is amazing that we keep coming back to those core elements of trust and integrity, be that with suppliers, be that with employees, be that with customers. And I think And what you've managed to encapsulate it is that in the final analysis, if those underpinning principles are in place, you stand a much better chance than if they aren't. So thank you very much, Karan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.